favorite horse racing moment you were a part of besides announcing?
There were 19 of them from 1984 to 1995. I drove in amateur races in the States. County fairs, amateur races at the pari-mutuel tracks, and I won 19 races in that period of time. I think it was 19 wins out of like 65 or 66 drives in those years. And so that was my greatest moment in harness racing, going to the winner's circle after winning a race.
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. Best non-announcing horse racing moment I was part of was the infamous match race against Gabe Prewitt at Pompano Park. We raised over $60,000 for charity. It was an unforgettable experience, and I won.
Before Dayton and Miami Valley opened, I worked for Virgil Morgan Jr. in the off-season. And his 3-year-old year, I got to ship Pet Rock to Chicago for the Windy City Pace, and he won with Doug McNair driving. So there's that one. And then the following year, he went back to Balmoral for the American National aged free-for-all. And he beat Foiled Again and some others, parked every step of the mile, 48 and 1 at Balmoral. So those are the two that I got to be a part of. But I didn't have, actually, I didn't take care of him on a regular basis. I just shipped him to race that year. And then the other one is, it's still Pet Rock, was when he won the Ewart and set a world record for a 4-year-old stallion, 47 and 2. He had about 10 days between then and when he went to Delaware and set a world record on a half mile, 48 and 1. And in between that mile, Virgil had one that was going to be in the Jugette, and they trained together. And my watch caught 26 and 2 on the end of the training mile. That's by far the fastest that I had ridden, but that was unofficially, that was just my watch, so I may have been wrong. But the Pet Rock, the time being around Pet Rock when I was working for Virgil was probably the best.
I got my first win as an owner this year with a horse that I claimed named Halley's Hero. I claimed him, had him in my dad's barn. My dad's a trainer at Woodbine, and got the horse to a point where I was ready to run him, ran him back, and he won and he got claimed. But I'd owned parts of horses that had won before, but this was my first one that I owned by myself. So that was, one of the most memorable moments of my life, was Halley's Hero winning that race for me.
My favorite horse racing moment. I found out one of our owners at the Loop, J. David Mooney is his name, legendary horse owner in Manitoba, actually throughout Western Canada. Used to be a track announcer at one time. He was a former driver, trainer. He's done pretty much everything within the industry. And I was talking to him one day, and he told me a story about a horse named Tough as Buff. And the horse, when he was born, his mom did not survive the birth. His mom died at birth, and everybody had given up on this horse because he was so young. He didn't have his mom to feed him and that. And the owner of the horse, she refused to give up on him, and she went out every 4 hours for 2 weeks. Either her or somebody else would make sure to bottle feed the horse and to get him to a point that he was be able to survive on his own after a couple of weeks with regular feedings and that. And I was told that story, and on the very same day I was told that story, Tough as Buff went out and won a stake race at the Loop. I can't remember which one, but being able to have that knowledge in my head, and then when he's standing in the winner's circle collecting his trophy and his blanket, and the owner is there. I think her name is Alice Gilbert, if I'm not mistaken. And if I got it wrong, I do apologize. But to have that moment and to tell the audience about that moment while he's in the winner's circle, and then hear the round of applause that story elicited from everybody. And it was such a touching moment. For whatever reason, that's just always stuck with me. Even though I've had a very, very short career in this business, it just stuck with me. It was just such a magical moment for the owner, for the horse, for the audience to hear that story. Those little backstories are just so cool, and to have it coincide on the same day like that, I think was an absolute magical moment.
You know what? I've been absolutely blessed to have so many great experiences in horse racing. I used to own thoroughbreds, so had a chance to travel to some great places to watch my horses race. But probably the greatest horse racing moment I ever had personally was meeting Zenyatta the morning after the 2010 Breeders' Cup. Also had a chance to meet Blaine in his barn, as well as meeting Mind That Bird, former Kentucky Derby winner, all in the same trip. And that was incredible.
There's a lot. Most of them come from Saratoga, just because that's where I grew up. So probably being on track when Arrowgate broke the 2-minute mark for a mile and a quarter at Saratoga, which had never been done. And I was watching it off of TV with my friend Brad, who was alive in the pick 6 to like 4 horses, and I bet Gun Runner, so obviously like he finished 3rd, but he was alive to Arrowgate, Gun Runner, and like 2 other horses. And Arrowgate at the time, nobody knew who Arrowgate was. So, he turns for home and he's alive for this, $10,000 pick 6, and he's got his hands in the air because Arrowgate's just rolling. And of course, me being a degenerate, I'm rooting for Gun Runner to get 2nd because I need the exacta. And they hit the wire and the time pops up, 1:59. And instantly, as soon as it popped up, I hit him like on the elbow. I was like, he just broke the track record because I knew it was 2 minutes. And, so Larry finishes his race call and then goes, and that's a new track record. But I was like, that was amazing that we were on track for the first time ever, a horse that broke 2 minutes for a mile and a quarter. But yeah, there's so many good ones. In recent years, last year, Nest winning the Alabama, watching Jackie's Warrior when he wins, and seeing some of those 2-year-olds in like those hopeful stakes before they, we watch them go to the Derby. But yeah, the best was probably on site for Arrowgate's performance, because that was something.
If I set aside announcing, my most favorite horse racing moment that I was a part of, I would say the 1978 Kentucky Derby. I was not there. I was only 9 years old, but Dave Johnson did the call for ABC's Wide World of Sports, and that was the first year that Dave did the call. And I remember my mom and dad were so excited about that. And as a kid, I was excited about it because our family had known Dave for a number of years. My father had actually worked with Dave. Dave had gotten his start as a track announcer in the St. Louis, Missouri area, which is where he grew up. And my dad was a harness racing steward at that time. This would have been back in the 1960s. And then Dave, by 1970, Dave took the job as the race caller for thoroughbred racing in New York, and his career just skyrocketed. But I remember when the news broke that Dave Johnson had been hired by ABC to call the 1978 Kentucky Derby. We were so excited at our house. And to give you an idea of how long ago that's been, no cell phones or anything, my mom and dad sent Dave a telegram congratulating him on being hired. And Dave actually used to call races at a few Illinois county fairs back in the 60s. He would slip out to the fairs and he would do some standardbred race calling with my dad. So my folks sent him a telegram, and it said, congratulations on being hired by ABC to call the Kentucky Derby. We trust this will not interfere with your availability to call harness races on the fair circuit this summer. So it was a very lighthearted telegram and a very sincere telegram that my mom and dad sent. And I remember we all sat down and gathered around the television. I can still picture it. The house that we lived in at the time is long gone now, but I can still remember how exciting it was for all of us to gather around the TV and hear our family friend Dave Johnson call the Kentucky Derby.
It was bittersweet time with Coach Pompano, very bittersweet. But having said that, we did sort of go out, on some strong notes. We had the top 4 or 5 handles in place that have been around for, nearly 60 years. So, I was proud that we were able to sort of breathe some life back into the place. I think just as an overall, not a specific moment, but just how that came about. So that was really cool to be able to do that and kind of get the support from the Synodon Army and a lot of people out there that like to bet on a nightly basis. I breed a few horses a year. I have just a very small, as small as you can possibly get, 1 or 2 mares. And anytime that you breed a horse, maybe sell it, or if you keep it or whatever you do. But, if you see a horse like that win that you've known since literally the day they were born, I think anyone that's in the business as a breeder and owner can attest that's really cool as well. So, yeah, I would say, one of those two things, just as I mentioned earlier, I enjoy being involved in, a lot of different aspects, not only the announcing, but I think the management, the wagering side, and then as an owner and breeder as well. So, I feel like I'm at least well-versed. I think owning and breeding gives me a little bit more of an overall picture that, when you're dealing with the horsemen's groups or horsemen, that you kind of understand a little bit of everything, all sides. So it gives you a little street cred there when, you're working through some of those issues on the management side as well.
Visually, because I wasn't there, because the Hambletonian, more often than not, is when the Naval Academy has its football media day. So I've only been able to go to one Hambletonian and one Meadowlands Pace now. But when I was 14, I got into this business with my neighbors who had horses with Roger Hammer. And vivid photo, I still watch the YouTube video probably once a month, twice a month. I still cry every time because of what Roger and him getting me into this business, teaching me all about this business was all about. And then when I was working on the Eastern Shore, I got to work with some incredibly wonderful people, Russ McGee, Jimmy Covington, Dr. Leroy Johnson, who taught me, hands-on how to do things. Cliff Green and his dad, Clayton, and Cliff's mom, Edna, they were amazing to me. And we had a horse named Tuggett in the Maryland Sire Stakes program that Cliff and his dad trained for a couple of people on the Eastern Shore, George and Clara Miles. And he was a small horse, but man, he had the biggest heart you've ever seen. And he was part of what I think is one of the greatest 2- and 3-year-old classes in the state of Maryland. And, Tuggett, what's ironic is Tuggett would slug it out with a couple of horses named Knight's Flash, Knight's Journey, Too Much Monkey Business, I'll Be Snoopin'. It was an incredible, incredible group. And ironically, Knight's Flash and Knight's Journey, who were owned by Dr. William Solomon and trained and driven by Sam Beagle, Cliff now trains a Maryland Sire Stakes trotter for Dr. William Solomon. He finished third in a 2-year-old stakes race Thursday night at Rosecroft. So life kind of comes full circle, but being a part of what Tuggett was doing, being able to warm him up and jog him on the farm track and everything like that, those are the moments that will stick out for me just because of personal connection. And it's amazing. I often, every time that Ken Warkington says, and vivid photo, Roger Hammer, they're stalking classic photo, and he's full of trot. I know the line, and I can repeat it at nauseum. Kenny's call the whole time from the fact that Roger took back, but Roger had raced vivid photo at Rosecroft, and I asked him before the race, and he told me, he goes, because my real first name is Peter Michael. It's Peter Michael, and he that's how he knew me. He called me Peter Michael. He said, Peter Michael, I'd love to be able to race this horse off the helmet because I think he's even better. The first time he raced him off the helmet was the Hambletonian, stalking Ron Peterson classic photo, the even money favorite, and he won. And to this day, seeing him and his co-owner Todd Shadle in the winner's circle, and it still gives me goosebumps to talk about it. I can see the race in my head as we're talking about it, and I still get those tears of joy every time I watch that race. And I think it in our industry, especially people that have been around it for a long time, another case in point, Shelley Greco on Facebook. Whenever market share memories come up, you can sense the emotion when she talks about it. And obviously Linda Toscano, who continues to have amazing success in our business, and she's worked with Linda for a long time. When you see people and those memories and what those horses meant to them, that emotion is real. That attachment is real. And I think that's the fun part of our business. While they may not be children in the purest sense of the word, they are children to people in our business, especially the ones that have raised them from the time they were foaled, through their yearling 2, 3, and especially the ones that go on to have incredible stakes success like that. That emotion is real from people that we see, and it really never goes away.
I have to say the 2011 Breeders' Cup, I hit every turf race that day, and I cleaned up to the tune of a couple of $1,000. I never have had a day like that where I just, everything. I had St. Nicholas Abbey, I had Tour Allure in the exacta with Court Vision, which paid me $1,000. I probably walked out of the track that day with a little over $2,500 based on everything, and it was just one of those days that you're just happy that you're betting the right thing when you actually get a little hot.
So I actually have several things for that, I guess. In the early days, like I said, when I was a kid growing up around the sport, just being able to be around the sport frequently was special. That was cool to me. But in terms of doing things other than announcing in the sport, everything that I do that's related to it is rewarding. I work in the race office and I do publicity and all that. I've done a good amount of writing about harness racing. That's rewarding and fun for me. But anything that I can do that gets me involved with fans or teaches new people about harness racing, I think is fun and special. We've done, things like horse expos representing standardbreds. We've gone into like parades and brought standardbred horses out in the parade and talked with people and taught them about harness racing and stuff like that. So anything like that. And then I do a lot of barn tours. I've done a lot of that over the years, which is just introducing people, taking them to the backstretch. A lot of them have never even seen a horse up close. Anything that gets people to know the horses and they're really the star. It connects people with the horses is definitely good for us in the long run. So those are the special things for me outside of announcing.
Well, we've had a couple just having horses. Last summer at Dresden, I think I had like 3 horses in, and 2 of them won and the other one was second. And for like a small stable, that was pretty exciting. And I was working the day, and I got to interview the driver that was driving our horses and that, so it was pretty special when you're right along the fence there working at the track and your horses go out and kick butt that day, so that was pretty special.
I guess it would have to be I like doing the pre-show kind of color commentating for the races. For the bigger days, like the last 2 Canadian Derbies, we had Peter Leary join us, TVG, or FanDuel TVG, and he was actually with the guys for Woodbine at King's Plate Day. But he's just such a pro, and just being alongside that compared to watching him on TV 2 years ago is it's pretty crazy. I mean, I couldn't imagine. And then now all of a sudden it was right there, and we're talking like we've known each other forever. It's amazing feeling.
I'll go back to when I was a kid. I don't have a vivid memory, but just anytime my great uncle Doug Sexsmith was an owner and trainer, and just being able to go for your picture. You know what I mean? That's just the best feeling ever. And I feel bad for my kids now that I don't really have any. I don't own anything. I don't really want to own anything, but they just always see their friends or other kids go out for a picture, and they're like, "Why can't we do that?" And I think that's the most memorable thing. Is it doesn't matter what horse. It doesn't matter if it was my uncle's. I had a friend that had parents that raced. It doesn't matter who it was. If you get to go for your picture, it was just the coolest feeling, right?
I mean, my favorite race, just as like a fan, I don't know what year it was, 2013-ish, 2012. It was when Blaine was really good. So it was probably, I'm talking thoroughbreds, but it was at Belmont Park. I remember I was with my family that day. It was Jockey Club Gold Cup,
And Haynesfield, who's a New York bred, turned into a really dud of a sire, but he was one of my favorites because I used to go like Empire Classic Day and go see all the New York breds. I'm a New York guy, right? Like, let's go Mets. Anyway, I was there at Belmont Park when Haynesfield just ran away from Blame, which was one of the coolest wins because, you know, Blame ultimately upset, you know, Zenyatta. He was just an absolute star. But the day Haynesfield ran away from Blame in the Jockey Club World Cup, that was just one of the coolest races I got to see because it was so unexpected, and I was such a fan of Haynesfield. So to me, cashing a ticket, whatever it was, the horse was like 2-1 and Blame was probably 3-5. I don't remember. Either way, that was just a really cool moment.
Back in 2019, I went on a little world tour of sorts. I went to Stoneboro, Pennsylvania on a Friday. Called down there. Jeff Siddick had me call on a Friday because he was busy with the Meadows. And then I hopped over the border and I went to Richwood, Ohio, because Mike Carter had gotten married the week before, and that was the one Friday I had to call Northfield so he could be married because everybody at Northfield was at his wedding. So they had nobody to call, so they had me come in and call that. So then the following weekend, I covered a couple fairs for him so he could go on his honeymoon. I went to Richwood, Ohio, and then I went down to Marietta, Ohio, and I called fairs back to back. And then after that, if I stand up real quick, I got the shirt for Ohio Super Night 2019. It was a fun night. It was all the Ohio Sire Stake finals for that year. I figured that was perfect. You know, I'm already going to be in Ohio. Yeah, I'm going to way down in Marietta, and I got to go all the way back across the state. But at least I'm in Ohio, and it was Labor Day weekend, so I didn't have to work the next day. So I jumped up there and watched Ohio Super Night. That was pretty cool. And that Robert J. Kane Memorial race that I'm telling you about became pretty significant by the time I got to the mid-2000s. And we had an open horse here that was pretty predominant back then. His name was Michael Scores. If you ever go inside of one of Batavia Downs' programs, Michael Scores is the page where they teach you how to read a program. They got one of his things on there where all the lines, and they're broken down, and it shows you how to read a program. And he'll forever be there now that Mr. Compton has passed. That's one of the things we vowed to do, is to leave Michael Scores' page thing in there to teach you how to read a program in the program. So he's solidified on that. Well, he won the 2006 version of the Kane Pace, and he won it in track record time. And that was pretty awesome for a local horse to beat some of them invitational pacers here at his home track. That was pretty awesome.
I also do some training and driving in addition to calling races. And one day at Woodbine, I had Doug Brown driving for me in the second race, and I was driving for myself in the first. And I actually won the first race with a trotter called Stiletto. So to be able to hand the lines to Doug Brown in the second, knowing he just watched me win the first, was pretty interesting.
By far was the super final in 2021. I hadn't owned a horse for about 20 years, and myself and my boss here wanted to get back into horse racing, and actually it was his uncle and aunts that owned DM Dillinger, so he'd been bugging me for 3 years. So Ken Middleton was looking at some claimers for me, and then finally, with the unfortunate passing of his partner Bill, he said, "Why don't you come down and look at it? I got a couple of yearlings." So we went down, and when we seen Bob Loblaw on the track, I'm like, "Hey, there's something about this horse, James. I kind of like him. The Don't Poke the Bear horse looks okay too." So we end up both getting involved with him and with his brother and with Jeff and Ken. So there's 5 of us in on Bob Loblaw, and he'd been making so many breaks, and the Metro, we had so many down points. But then the super final night, you know, Sylvain chose him over another horse, and the way he came down and won that race, and obviously it was also a big race the way that he was able to say about time Bob at the wire. So when he passed all those horses, a $250,000 race, unfortunately Bob got injured just before after the SBOAs last year, and hopefully he's coming back. He's been jogging back, but by far that was the biggest moment. My daughter was there with me, and it was just so fun to watch a horse come from the backfield and win. Is just that much more satisfying than a horse that wins on the engine. And he beat a lot of good horses that night, and he's a really good horse, and we're really hoping that he comes back for us this fall.
I've got a few. You know, it's funny. I wasn't very old when Kawartha Downs first opened. Now I have a young child's eyes And I remember the lights, and I believe we were in the backstretch at Kawartha Downs, and we were with my parents and friends of theirs who had horses. And I just remember the bright lights and kind of the hoopla around the racetrack. That was way back in the 70s. Might have been 73 when the track opened. But one of the things more recently, I had a friend of mine, a family friend, and he was a trainer. And anyways, I approached him about getting into horse ownership and involving my son, kind of for their university education experience to help with that. And basically, if we helped muck out the stalls on the weekends, help jog the horses, everything was pretty good. We would contribute what we could and go to the racetracks when we could. One of the first horses that we did have won on the second night out. And at that night, actually, I was calling the races at Kawartha Downs, so I called our horse. And it was pretty exciting. And I quickly had somebody fill in for me for the Winner's Circle presentation. I ran down the stairs. My parents were there. My son was there. We had a lot of family to watch our horse race. And to get a picture in the Winner's Circle, I got it framed. It's kind of for my son. It's in his treasure chest now, and he's older. But it was quite a moment. And yeah, calling a horse that we had a piece of as it won, especially at Kawartha Downs, was such a thrill. So that's one of my favorite experiences.
My favorite horse racing moment outside of announcing was my first parimutuel win as a trainer. Came at Northfield Park in the summer of '95. I grew up in a small town, but there were no horses around. I literally never pet a horse on the nose even until I was 18 years old. So I did not grow up around animals. I graduated high school, went on to college, graduated from college, and I think I was more proud of earning my trainer's license than I was of my college degree, because I worked harder for it. It was just completely unnatural to me, having not even been around horses. And then when I started working at the Meadows back in the late 80s, we were a nighttime track. So you'd work during the morning, it was a business, and then you'd be done in the afternoon and you'd come back at night. Well, in the afternoon, I had not much to do, so I'd go up into the barns and I'd sit there and I made some friends, and I would sit there and watch them and watch what they were doing. And I kind of got interested in it and learned about it. And I decided to buy my own horse, and I couldn't race at the Meadows back then, so I was able to race up at Northfield. And just that whole process of going from somebody who had never been around horses at all to earning a trainer's license to getting my first win, that night is one that I'll never forget. I mean, we're 28 years past that moment, and I still remember every part of that. And going back to the Winner's Circle on the golf cart to get the picture taken and all that. I mean, it was just it was a special moment in the sport, and one that I never thought I'd have. The announcing, all of that. I mean, that's great. I enjoy it. I love it. But that was a little bit of a different feeling, winning a race as an owner and trainer.
Aside from announcing, I take great pride in racing and raising and breeding my own racehorses. Winning any race, whether it's at Clinton or Hanover or anywhere, it's a real thrill. But I think I'd be lying if I didn't say truthfully we'd like to have stake horses, and it's quite a moment when you can win races at Mohawk, because it's the greatest stage. They've got the greatest horse people there, the greatest horses are there, so if you can win a race there, it's really a feather in the cap. So I strive to have horses that are able to race there. We don't always get them there, and they don't always win, but it's really cool to be able to race, and really, really special if it's a homebred or something like that wins a significant race.
I would say probably one of the coolest moments for me was in my other broadcasting capacity, hosting at Mohawk Park when Some Beach Somewhere won the Pepsi North America Cup. Just to be there as a fan or a spectator, that alone, would have been enough. But to be part of the broadcast that night, going all across Canada on a national, sports network was quite a thrill. So getting to do that, and of course, in recent years, I've been able to be part of the CBS broadcast of the Hambletonian, which is the holy grail of harness racing. So to be involved in those broadcasts and witness those amazing moments firsthand is a big thrill and something that I'll always cherish.
I own quite a few horses, and anytime any one of the horses that you own wins or races well, that's exciting.
I've raced a few horses over the years. I had a filly in 2008 and 2009. She was actually quite exceptional in 2009. She wins several stake races, and she always seemed to race when I was doing the call on PEI. But there was one holiday Monday in New Brunswick that I got to take the mare over myself and race her with my brother-in-law. Now, there was 108 millimeters of rain fall that day in St. John. The filly had to race twice. It was an elimination and a final in the same day. Finished third in the elim, ended up winning the final, and for me, it doesn't get any better than that.
As people that follow me on Twitter know, I'm a pretty avid horse player, not just an announcer. And so I do like to go south, like I mentioned, and go to Del Mar and bet. And I do bet. I don't bet every single day, and I don't bet every track. But a moment that would have to stand out for me is that I did hit a pick six in 2019 from Gulfstream Park, one of their mandatory payout days, and it paid $101,000. So that was a pretty good day. It was a strange day too, because we just got back from vacation and our cable wasn't working, so I was literally running the races to watch them using my cell phone as the only Wi-Fi we had, and the feed was really choppy, and it was just a strange day, and I ended up being alive to one horse in the last leg. Didn't know what the payouts even were, because in the pick six, when it's mandatory, at least back then, and especially Gulfstream didn't show the payouts. There had been a 50-to-1 horse in the sequence, so I had an idea it was probably paying half decent. But the horse actually won, and then just like to click refresh on your HPI account, it comes up $101,000. Not an experience that most people have had, and was a pretty exciting day. Absolutely a great day that day for me.
Probably winning my first race as a trainer, and any time I win as a horse trainer, even as an owner. Probably, honestly, my favorite was my first win I ever had in the business. And this is a funny story because I'll give a shout out to the guy that was announcing. So I bought a horse out of Lebanon Raceway back in 06 named Casey's Buddy. And my trainer that I selected was a friend of a friend, and he was going down to Bluegrass Downs in Kentucky on western side of Kentucky. And I had never been there before. I'd only seen some videos of it. And we drove down. They have an hour time difference from where I was living in Lexington, and I barely made the race. We pulled in the parking lot, and they were going into the gate. I ran to the window and put a bet on my horse because it was my first time owning, and I'm like, well, I'm going to bet on my horse, right? So I run in and I put a bet on him, and the race goes off. He ends up winning, and the track announcer was Michael Kravchak, who's now a realtor, and he just made it special. He announced it as my first ever win in the business, congratulated me. It just made a big deal out of it. But one of the other things that I remember about it was he used ready, aim, fire to start a race. And I absolutely loved it. I had never heard it before. And, I at some point I used it in a race call when I first started announcing the fairs, and it got another great receptive response from the audience, and so I only use it for the big races here. I'll use it for the Open. So when I announce the Opens, whether it's the Open Trot, Philly Mare Open, or the Open Pace tonight, I always use ready, aim, fire to start the race, and that's just to honor Michael and my first win in the business. I do that. I get some comments from other announcers, or I have. That I need to find my own material because it's hard, it's hard to come up with your own stuff sometimes. And when you listen to enough track announcers, you hear these phrases that they use and you kind of adapt them into your race call styling. And so I've got a lot of my original material. There's a couple things that I've borrowed along the way. And I've actually spoke to one of the announcers that I've heard one of the catchphrases from, and he was like loved it. He was like, he was so happy that I did that because he's not announcing anymore, and he appreciated it. But yeah, I love honoring the people that I've learned from. I'm still new doing this as a parimutuel announcer. So to me, if I could pay respect to my fellow announcers that I have learned from, and by doing so using a catchphrase or a line that they've used in a race call, I'm not doing it to, to do it to benefit myself. I'm doing it just because I appreciate the people that have taught me things and that I've learned from, and to honor them.
I'm going to give you two. So I went to the Kentucky Derby, and it was the time where the horse that was 50 to 1 to make the movie on, Mime the Bird. So that was the one time I got to go to the Kentucky Derby. I'd always wanted to go there. Mime the Bird won 50 to 1. We were in the infield, and it was the first year that they had this special thing in the infield. So we actually had seats in there, and for some reason they decided not to give us the sound, so we could just watch the race. And they learned from that, because everybody complained that was there. But I was like saying to my friend, where did that horse come from? Because it slid on the rail. The jockey they called Bo Rail, and because he loved to play on that, and he slid by and won 50 to 1. And the neat thing is they made a movie of that, and I think it's called 50 to 1. And I saw the movie, so that's pretty neat. Another time, so I went. This was before I was in racing. I went to Saratoga Harness to bet on the Kentucky Derby, and my father-in-law owned a sawmill, and there was this guy that he had horses, and he worked for a bunch of places that had horses, and he told me, I can tell you, he's got a good chance to win the Kentucky Derby. A horse called Thunder Gulch. But I figure it's worth to throw some money on him. Well, it won, and I also hit the exacta, trifecta, and I think it went off at 23 to 1, and I won over $11,000. And so I get home for my wife, and at the time we were searching for a house, and so she before I could spend it, which is a good thing, she took it, and we put a down payment on the house, and we went to the mortgage place, and they said, okay, I noticed you got a big jump in your money. And I told her why, and she goes, I'd never heard that one before. So it was pretty cool that it was Thunder Gulch, and that's what we actually call our house in fun sometimes. But because of Thunder Gulch, we were able to get the down payment and get the house we wanted. We still live there. We've lived there now 28 years.
There was a race at Hawthorne in 2005 that was entitled the Cicero Final. Cicero is the city that Hawthorne is actually next to. Hawthorne's actual city location is Stickney, Illinois, but Cicero is like one step away. I owned a horse named Be True to Us, all one word, Be True to Us. I was never the announcer at Hawthorne. And so he was in a $15,000 final. It's on YouTube, by the way. At that time, Balmoral would race on Saturday and Sunday. Well, I don't remember what it was, but Balmoral, Maywood, and Hawthorne all raced the same week. I called it Maywood and Balmoral, and Hawthorne had their own cards. So he's in this race, and as the race goes on, he steadily backs up. And the week before, he had won an elimination or a division of the prep for the final. And at the top of the stretch, he had no chance to win. And I tell people I was like Yul Brynner. I was just like, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was just Yul Brynner, the King and I. And I just couldn't believe my eyes. I said, how could this horse be so bad after winning? And now they went about another 16th of a mile, and now he's starting to gain a little ground. And now they're approaching the 7/8. And I'm going, okay, get a check. And Ron Marsh was driving him. And now they're at mid-stretch, and he's starting to gain. And now they're with about a 16th to go, and he knifes to the inside, and he explodes. And here he comes, and he wins the race. And Jeremy, I screamed so much in the last 16th of a mile, "Come on, Beatrudas! Come on, Beatrudas!" And he wins the race. It was, a friend of mine described it best. He said it was a scene out of Walt Disney, because he could not win at the race. He was backing up at the top of the stretch, and he ends up winning the race. And we were terribly happy. And I yelled so hard in that 16th of a mile that the next day at Balmoral, you could hear I was a little scruffy in my voice because I had yelled so much. And that was great to have him win that race. He's just he wasn't an expensive horse, but it was the biggest purse that I'd ever raced for at the time. And when you watch the race, you'll say, how did he win? Could not have won, but he did.
A lot of the television shows that the traveling shows, the American Championship Harness Series I did with Gary Seibel, and Bruce Beck was part of that, and he actually had to move into network television, and that left the door open for me to join Gary Seibel. But traveling around and following all the great races, the Breeders' Crowns, and I did the Jug a couple of years on ESPN with Gary Seibel, and just doing the television, traveling television shows, and I wish they did more of those. Right now they're doing the FS in America, FS1, FS2, which is a national coverage. It's not really the same in my opinion, and the Hambletonian now is like a tape delay show. It's kind of a separate thing. I kind of miss doing that. And I still get to do television and commentary and interviews and things and the like at Red Shores in Charlottetown for Old Home Week, and that's always fun.
Oh, I've had so many. Horses have kind of given me everything in my life. My career in racing is so kind of tied up to my self-identity. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. I will say the greatest moment, and kind of the first one that comes to mind for me, is closing weekend at Suffolk when we were finally winding things down, 2019. This was the real end. I had never gotten to ride on the track at Suffolk, and the Clark family lent me their stable pony, Mr. Meso, who was a Massachusetts bred stakes winner. He won like $500,000 and was just an amazing war horse. And they let me take him for a spin on the track and do my paddock commentary from his back for the first race. And getting to ride down the track I loved on a horse that was, I've ridden some nice horses. Mr. Meso's the coolest thing I will have ever sat on in my life. He was one of those horses that had this, he knows he's special. It was just it was a grand moment, and one that I'll cherish forever.
I would say, just because the people were kind enough and compassionate enough to invite me to the post-race celebration, when Lifetime Dream won the 1993 Breeders' Crown at Mohawk, they had a party afterwards over at the Mohawk Inn. So this party had all the horse people, usual occurrences like card games and food and beverage. Anyway, this was going on and on and on. Suddenly it got to be 8:30 in the morning. In those years, on alternating weeks, I co-hosted and hosted a radio show from downtown Toronto on Sports Radio, the Fan 590, called The Racing Forum. So in those years, the thoroughbred announcer Dan Loisel would host one week, I would host the next week. So the morning after the Breeders' Crown, I was host of The Racing Forum on Sports Radio, the Fan 590. And it was the first and only time in my career where I partied with Breeders' Crown winners all night after the races till 8:30 in the morning, and then an hour later interviewed them live on the radio from Bloor and Yonge, or Bloor and Dundas in downtown Toronto, wherever the studios were in those years. But that was the only time I partied all night with people, and then interviewed them an hour later on the radio about their Breeders' Crown win the night before. It was a very wonderful, euphoric time.
Well, my dad was the person who took me to the races the first time. I grew up in Toronto, and my first trip to a track was Greenwood Raceway. And I think I kind of got hooked, right? And I certainly spent too many hours trying to pick a winner unsuccessfully. But my dad was one who looked for the long shot and looked for the upset, and we went to the North America Cup on a Saturday night, and my dad looked at the program, as he is prone to do, and says, well, I kind of think this 6 horse has a shot. And I said to him, are you crazy? The horse was quite a sensation. The driver was Terry Ritchie. Quite a sensation. I think went off at 25-1 or something, but Trevor carved out a perfect second over trip, and sure enough, in the stretch, quite a sensation, pulled to the outside and just got up in the final strides. I remember my dad hooting and hollering and cheering all the way to the finish line. It was fun to be with him. My dad did get to see me announce back in the days when I was up at Hanover, and I don't think he made it out to Clinton to see me announce. My dad passed away 16 or 17 years ago now, but that's the moment that sticks out to me when I saw that question. So.
Well, before I started at the Thoroughbreds, I was actually partners with a former Vancouver Canuck who's since passed away, Barry Wilkins. He scored the first NHL goal for the Vancouver Canucks. We had a horse that raced at Hastings, and he was okay, but he wasn't that great, and he was too big for the track. So we sent him to Longacres, and it was a big 12-horse field. It was Canada Day. We just got there, got licensed. He was in the first race, and he was last for a lot of the journey, going 6 furlongs. They hit the top of the lane, and I don't know what happened, but man, he took off and ended up winning in a very good time too. So that was pretty exciting for all of us, because he'd raced so poorly prior to that. But we had this one old wise Scottish sage who said to us, he's too big for this track, get him out of here. So we did, and that was a great time. It was pretty heart pounding, that's for sure.
Well, there's a couple. When I look back at some of the races, I think I was always a fan and a participant that way. And then, of course, as somebody who, would wager on races and things as well as I got older, but was never a horse owner. And about 5 years ago, I jumped in and I said, I was very fortunate again being a great fan of Old Home Week and the Gold Cup and Saucer and racing in PEI. I was able to be selected as one of the horse owners in the stable that had an entry in the Gold Cup and Saucer, a horse by the name of Lincoln James. So my very first time owning a share of a horse was him being entered in the Gold Cup trial, and then he made the final. So really, second time a horse ever races, I'm on the fence. They're going for 50 or 60,000, and this is the race that if I want to own a horse to win a race, it's that, right? So anyway, we didn't win, but that was probably the great moment. I've had a couple of shares in at least one other horse that's come down to race in it, and so. That would be the ultimate dream, would be to be in the winner's circle after that race. I guess calling it and winning it would be two great things that I'd love to be able to say I did. But that's a big one. And I guess just being there all the years, like I said, my dad and I spent a lot of time there at Old Home Week over the years, and got to see a lot of great races and some great calls. Again, I remember 1986, I was 13 years old, and a horse by the name of Rev Your Engine and Phil Pinkney, who just passed away, I think last year, great horseman from the Maritimes from Nova Scotia. And my dad was a big fan of his, like one of the best calls, in Gold Cup history. And then being there when Vance called one with Earl Smith winning the Gold Cup and Saucer, which, I think Vance might consider to be, he said it was the greatest Gold Cup and Saucer race, but also probably his best race call. in his illustrious career. Being on the fence that day and seeing that race and seeing Earl Smith win and just being part of some of those great moments, right? And as a fan and a spectator in maritime harness racing history is there's some great memories there for sure.
Oh gosh, there were so many moments that were special for me watching racing. So one of them was in Zenyatta's win in the Breeders' Cup, because I was a guest with a friend of mine who had been writing a book on announcers, actually. So she and I would chat a lot, and she said, well, come to the Breeders' Cup with me, because she was such a big fan of Zenyatta. And Zenyatta won, but what was so amazing was, you know, it was such a thrilling win by Zenyatta in the Breeders' Cup win. I mean, she lost the second time narrowly, but that was at Santa Anita. We saw her just unfurl this run and just got up. And as I turned to her, she was just, you know, tears sort of streaming down her face because she was so passionate about horses. And it was such a sweet moment. It was such a sweet moment. I thought, oh, horse racing really does touch people's lives. You know, it really does. I was very overwhelmed by just the moment, because the entire stands had just seen history and erupted. It was just a wave of emotion. It was quite amazing. And Trevor's call was amazing. It was a very stirring moment. Going back in a very strange sort of situation in Melbourne, I loved the Melbourne Cup. As a kid, I couldn't go to the Melbourne Cup. We often fell on a race. It was a Tuesday, and we had to do sports day, and I couldn't get out of it. And I was like, I have to go to the Melbourne Cup. So when I was finally able to go and of age to go to the Melbourne Cup, I would always try and go there. There were 2 Melbourne Cups that were really amazing, and I went with one of them with my sister. We didn't have seats. I was still, you know, pretty young at the time and trying to get a decent chance to view it. We were down below and we were on the level, and there was a horse that was trained by the groom of what was Farlap. He was still alive. He was in his latter years, and he had this one horse that had won across all the 2-mile races in the entire country. He'd done the circuit and was coming into the Melbourne Cup as a horse that had won all these races and had previously in the previous Melbourne Cup run a very close race at a huge price. I think he finished 4th, but then he developed as an older horse, a bit of a battling horse, into this great horse, and he came up against the favourite, and he had given him a little bit of time off, and he decided that he'd be fresh for the race. And as they came down the home straight, as they call it, these 2 came away with the race, and it was just an unbelievable moment, because he didn't win. I was just like, ugh. But he gave the most incredible run. It was just because it was like his last chance as a groom, as a trainer, I should say, this former groom, to have his moment. And I don't know, the whole country wanted him to win. Bart Cummings, who was the Cup's King, won. These 2 horses were Golden Black and Reckless. It was amazing. It's 1977, and I will always remember that. And the horse that ran 3rd came out and won the Melbourne Cup 2 years later. So it was very interesting. It was classic. And then just a side note on that, I was visiting back to see a Melbourne Cup, and I was unable to get a seat. I was just in this massive 100,000 crowd standing there. And I didn't really have a feel. I didn't have the feel for the form. I'd been living overseas, but I was watching them. And one of the things I've learned over the years as an announcer is it really matters to look at horses. I've really realized that, and it really makes horse people, you know, what they do is amazing. It matters how they present a horse and how ready the horse is for a race. And I had these bets, and I didn't like any of them. And as they're going out onto the track, they're just coming in front of us very quickly, really quickly. And then I'm looking at them and I go, who's that one? And I'm looking and I said, oh my gosh, this one, that's going to win. I said, that is going to win. It looks unbelievable. And it was Maccabee Diva. It was the first Melbourne Cup she ever won. And she went on to win 3. And I couldn't even see the finish because we were so many people. And they just came storming. I said, who won? And they said, Maccabee Diva. I'm like, damn it. I knew that horse looked amazing. So those things stood out because of the emotion and the spectacle and just the fact that I had this vibe. I'm like, I know that horse is going to win. And it did. Plus, when you're surrounded by people who are in that scale with anticipation for a moment in history and you get it, there's nothing quite like it. When you get to call it, it's even more amazing. Yeah.
I think to a lot of the North America Cups, I guess it's still kind of tied in the realm of announcing, but being part of some of the national broadcasts for the North America Cup, being able to be in the winner's circle to get the instant reaction, walking back with the driver, that's pretty cool. I think those were fun to be a part of. I've been a part of 2 of those now, the last 2 years for the North America Cup. And also, I think just as a fan, and obviously the legacy that is Some Beach Somewhere, the night that he won the North America Cup, I've done so many odd jobs at the track over my years, and even as a kid, whatever they needed me to do, I said, sure, I'll do it. And one of the jobs I learned pretty early on was timing the races. And so for the North America Cup in 2008, I opted not to stand on the rail as I was doing earlier in the night, but I ran up to the press box. I think I was 14 or 15 years old. And I said, can I run the timer for this race? Just so I could say I did something that was part of a race that we all knew was going to be really historic. So that's probably one of them that stands out for me.
I would have to say, gosh, I don't want to have to, I know I already gave the answer before, but, foiled against 100 meant, such a lot to me. I would have to say that. I would have to say Falcon Sealster in Delaware, Ohio, with Roger's famous call on that one. That was an electrifying moment, especially when, Roger said, you better get up now. If you're not standing, you better get up now. Honestly, there's so many. There's so many favorite moments. I will tell you from one kind of different perspective, and this is when I was at announcing. I was at the OTB with my dad, and we were actually at Balmoral Park. We were at Maywood Park, and I loved. I'll never forget the horse's name. The horse's name was Plateau's Beauty. It was a filly and mare preferred, and she drew post 8. And at Maywood Park, post 8 is pretty much a death sentence, kind of like a lot of half-mile tracks. So I put her on top in a try with a horse by the name of Art Light, number 5 second. I put all for third, and I played it for $2. So the ticket cost me, I don't know, $12 or $14. And Plateau's Beauty won at 8-1. Art Light comes second at 45-1. Then I had a long shot there. The trifecta paid like $3,000. And I was kind of into music at the time. So I hit for $3,000 the next day. I went to the music store. I got an electric guitar, an amp, a drum set, and after that, I barely had enough money for a Subway sandwich. So that's a moment that I'll stick with.
My most favorite harness racing moment outside of calling horse races, I used to drive a bit in the matinee circuit back in Prince Edward Island. Always wanted to call horse races, always wanted to drive race horses. I was driving in the matinee circuit, and I happened to win a race aboard my own horse, RB's Cash, in Kensington, Prince Edward Island, a non-betting matinee affair. But for me, that's probably my most favorite moment outside of announcing the horse races.
Hello everyone, Jeremy Grbatin here. I just wanted to thank each and every announcer that took the time to be part of the voices from Gate to Wire. It has been a wonderful experience getting to talk to the voices that make horse racing come to life. was so inspired by their stories that when I had the opportunity to announce 2 races at Flamborough Downs, I jumped at the chance. And let me tell you, it is not as easy as they make it look.
Starter has called the field for race number 3. Just a reminder, my name is Jeremy Gerbatten, and if you don't like the sound of my voice, well, Gary will be here next race.
Once again, thank you to everyone that helped me with this project, and I'll be hearing your calls again very soon.